I would love to, excuse me, that's really loud. I would love to invite any elected officials and those who have officially filed to come and introduce yourselves at the mic to the side of the panel. And as that one person is coming to the front, I'd like to I'll ask all of you, and you're welcome to shout it out, what would you consider to be the hallmark of what makes the League of Women Voters so special beyond our incredibly reliable, credible research? Who are we and what are we known for? Okay. This worked when I asked it my husband. Are we partisan? No, I'm sorry, what are we? Louder? One more time. Who are we? Okay. We are nonpartisan. And so as I invite all of these folks to come and introduce themselves, I want to reinforce that we are nonpartisan, and I would like to ask you to refrain from applause. It's in very small actions and it's in very large actions that we either reinforce our good reputation or we choose to diminish it. And so right now, I am going to ask for all of us to please refrain from clapping for any one of the people who's getting ready to introduce themselves, because I promise at the very end, we will clap enthusiastically for all of them.
Ditto.
Thank you. Sheila DeCiccio, Mayor of Winter Park. And if you have a minute, take a look at that gorgeous view. Welcome everybody to Winter Park. Thank you.
Robin Dellinger, Seminole County School Board.
Noah Widman, running for Congress in Florida's 7th Congressional District.
Angie Gallo, Orange County School Board.
Good afternoon, Stephanie Vanos, Orange County School Board, District 6.
Good afternoon, I am Rashawn Young, running for House District 40.
Hi, Scott Randolph, I'm your Orange County tax collector. Don't worry, I take money from Republicans, Democrats, Socialists, Communists, and anybody else.
Hello everyone. Ana Vazquez, proudly serving District 42 in the Florida Legislature and running to be Orlando's next mayor.
No applause.
Good afternoon, Monique Worrell, your twice duly elected state attorney. So happy to be here with you as always.
Yay!
For everyone now.
Everything we learned that we needed to know, we learned in kindergarten, right? I would love to acknowledge our sponsors now. Without all of you, we would not be probably quite as effective as we are. So we are very, very grateful for your involvement with us. Our bronze sponsor is Cynthia McKinnon. I'd like to acknowledge our silver sponsors. David is here, Lynn is not, but thank you to the Barrelmans, excuse me. Voting Voices, Michelle Levy, Laurie and Richard Wack, and Charlie Williams. And our visionary sponsor, we are grateful for Jennifer and Phil Anderson. So thank you all. In Shakespeare's Julius Caesar, Antony describes Caesar's wound from Brutus as the most unkindest cut of all. And it's not just because of the wound. It's because it was inflicted upon him by a trusted friend. In our lifetime, the government has been that trusted friend. In our lifetime, they have afforded us the ability to be able to do things in our communities where our individual selves would have not been able to muster it. Things like infrastructure, education, scientific research, and Today we want to take a look at what this might mean for Central Florida. Much is still up in the air and unpredictable as we speak. So admittedly, this is a broad overview. We promise to delve more deeply into some of those issues in future months. Many of you know our moderator today. He's a familiar voice and presence on all our different screens, helping us understand the important local issues of the day. Steve Mort is host and executive producer of NewsNight on WUCF-TV, Central Florida's PBS affiliate. Welcome, Steve.
All right. Thank you all so much for being here. I think the size of the crowd today really sort of shows us the importance, I think, that people attach to the subject that we're talking about. I want to thank the League as well for hosting this. It's certainly an important issue for all of us. Today we're talking about a subject that affects organizations, both large and small, throughout Central Florida, and that, of course, is government funding. It's a time of uncertainty. Uncertainty is a word that we're hearing a lot of these days when it comes to funding, both from the federal government, but also from the state government, as Florida lawmakers continue to try to hash out a budget in Tallahassee. So we've got a great panel today that I think will give us an insight into how those funding changes will affect them and the work they do, but also, by extension, the broader community as well. So with no further ado, I'll welcome them, bring them up to the front here. First off, Kelly Astro is a Senior Vice President for Community Impact at the Heart of Florida United Way. With more than 25 years of experience, Kelly is a dedicated leader who excels in program development, teaching, and community engagement. Thanks for being here, Kelly. Derrick Chubbs is President and CEO of Second Harvest Food Bank of Central Florida, leading efforts since 2022 to combat hunger and its root causes across the diverse 7-county region. Derrick has earned multiple leadership and community honors, including Orlando Magazine's 50 Most Powerful Philanthropy Voices. Thanks for being here, Derrick. Appreciate it. Next up, someone I'm pretty familiar with from NewsNight, Skyler Swisher. He's a reporter at the Orlando Sentinel. He covered the 2025 session of the Florida Legislature, at least the regularly scheduled part of it. He's reported on many of the hot-button issues that affect Florida voters. Before he joined the Sentinel, he covered politics, elections, Mar-a-Lago, health, and other topics at the South Florida Sun-Sentinel and the Daytona Beach News Journal. Welcome, Skyler Swisher. And Dr. Maria Vazquez, she's a superintendent of Orange County Public Schools. She's served at every level of the education system and has extensive expertise in curriculum and instruction. In 2022, she became superintendent of Orange County Public Schools, the 8th largest school district in the country. Dr. Vazquez, welcome. Well, we'll crack right on with it because we've got a lot to get through today. And I want to talk about something that we've been hearing about for months now, and that's the federal DOGE cuts, the president's elimination of federal programs and departments, and also Florida's DOGE investigation of higher education and local government. As I'm sure that some of you are aware as well, in public broadcasting, we're also dealing with uncertainty surrounding the status of funding for the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, PBS, and NPR. And I'm wondering, given that, how your organizations are responding to proposed cuts in funding at the federal and or state level. Let's start with you, Kelly.
Well, thank you very much. I'm thrilled to be here today. I feel I accomplished at least one good thing by walking up here with a cup and not spilling it. So we're off to a good start.
Likewise.
Yes. Well, I think, at Heart of Florida United Way, and just a brief background, we are one of the largest nonprofit organizations serving Orange, Osceola, and Seminole County. We've been around for 85 years. We have seen good times and bad, money and no money. I think right now, what we are really in the process of doing is preparing for potential cuts. We don't know what they are. None of us really know what they are. We don't know how large they'll be, how small they'll be, what sectors they'll really be in. But we're really trying to take that proactive approach. And we're kind of in that process of reviewing our various funding streams, where they're coming from, which programs are most critical to meet the needs and the basic needs of our community members, and how we go about looking at identifying other sources of revenue so that we don't have to consider cutting those programs. I think, the other thing that is really, really critical is the way that we begin to partner with our fellow nonprofit organizations. We are all interconnected. And so when something happens to one, it happens to all of us. And so if something, if there is a cut that's happening at Second Harvest, the programs that we provide are going to be impacted as well as those individuals start coming to us, or vice versa. So, I think that ultimately what we are really, really focused on is ensuring that our main kind of audience of individuals we serve, the ALICE population, that's asset limited, income constrained, but employed. The hardworking individuals going paycheck to paycheck who are just one financial crisis away from, complete devastation, making sure that they do not fall off that benefits cliff when certain benefits from the federal and state government are cut.
Derrick, how about you? I know you've been out in the community a lot. You've been on NewsNight as well, talking about how cuts affect your organization. Explain that to folks.
We've been telling the story to anybody who would listen, for starters. You've probably seen it. Just over the past 4 to 5 weeks, we've had 2 significant funding sources that have been eliminated. One of the first ones you probably saw, it came along with the loss of 28 truckloads of food. And we talked a little bit about that. Now, that's the emergency food, part of the emergency food assistance program that's funded by the federal government. The LFPA funding and the CCC funding all together, just those 2, basically will equate to 8 million meals not making it to somebody's plate this year. So that's the immediate impact that we've seen. Like I said in the beginning, we've tried to tell the story to anyone who would listen. We're appealing to our community, to our supporters, to our lawmakers, just to get them to understand the scale of this impact. And those are just 2 programs. There are a couple of others, and hopefully between working with our neighbors and our feeding partners, we'll still be here and we'll continue to distribute. We just won't be distributing as much. That week's worth may now be 2 to 3 days.
Yeah. I'm going to ask Dr. Vazquez next. I've got a slightly different question for Skyler, so I'm not skipping over you, Skyler. What is the impact there at the school district, sort of 10,000-foot view?
Thank you so much for having me today. The impact to Orange County Public Schools is both from a state level and from the federal level. Although we receive less than 1% of federal funding for our operating budget from the federal government, we do anticipate cuts that will impact services to our students, specifically in the area of Medicaid and some of the Title I entitlement programs, Title I, II, III, and IV. Those we are in limbo and are waiting with bated breath to see what that impact is for not just this upcoming year, but the following year. At the state level, what has mostly impacted Orange County Public Schools is the scholarship program. Several years ago, the state allowed for choice options, but there were limits based on income. They have since removed them, and based on the number of families that are enrolling in the voucher program, we are slated to lose around $28 million for the upcoming school year. That's resulted in a 2% cut in departments at the district level. Schools' budgets have also been adjusted for declining enrollment, and that equates to about 800 teachers that received letters that they did not have a position for them for the following year. And we are trying to match them with 400 vacant positions that we have for the upcoming school year.
Skyler, I mean, in journalism, we don't necessarily always get, I mean, we sometimes do in terms of grants, government money, but there are substantial financial challenges currently in our business as well.
Yeah, absolutely. At the Orlando Sentinel, we're not government funded. I mean, the principle is that we cover the government, so we shouldn't be receiving government funding. However, I mean, our business model has certainly been upended, particularly in print media. I mean, we relied on a lot of advertising revenue from our print product, which I'm sure, as you all know, is not as popular as it once was. However, you know, we're really looking for strategies to cover important topics, and something that's happening here in Central Florida is that there's a collaborative of 10 newsrooms. So when you think about journalism, you think about reporters competing against each other, they want to get the big scoop, but in this case, we have competing media outlets actually working together to cover a law that was passed in Florida that bans public camping, and this has really affected our homeless community. As a result of that collaboration, I mean, we produced over 30 stories. I mean, we're covering the homeless count, the controversy about the shelter in South Orlando. We're tallying up how often police are arresting people for violating this public camping ban. So it's really just a way for us to kind of pool our resources together and to focus on a very important topic for the community.
Yeah, we're hearing a lot, not just in journalism, but in sectors across the spectrum, that collaboration can be a way to sort of try to overcome some of the cost challenges. Skyler, I did just want to ask you about the funding issues that we're seeing on the state level. How does the state level DOGE effort compare with federal cost-cutting work? You've been looking at a lot of this.
Yeah, so one of the key differences is that it's really focusing on universities and local governments, and it is voluntary. So you're not going to see like Florida DOGE roll up into City Hall and just start, firing government workers, but they are asking for a lot of information. They're asking for like salaries, for grants, research at public universities, and just to kind of give you an idea of how Florida DOGE is operating. They found a grant at the University of West Florida, and the purpose was to train math and science teachers to work in high-need schools. But in some of the grant language, there was references to social justice. And for the DeSantis administration, this social justice language kind of raised some red flags for them. So they actually have put a lot of pressure on the University of West Florida to return that grant funding. So I think as we move forward, you're going to see a lot of that going on in terms of the Florida DOGE going in, looking at grants, looking for what they would consider to be, diversity, equity, and inclusion, and really trying to put some political pressure on those fronts.
I want to talk about some of the specific changes in your organizations that you've seen, say, over the past year or so, and I'll put this one to Derrick first. I mean, in terms of the programs that you guys are looking at that might be at risk, what are you concerned about when it comes to federal or state cuts? I think the state is still financing you, but in terms of the federal cuts, what programs are at risk?
Well, the one that we're the most concerned about at this juncture is the amount of food that we're able to distribute. There are a few others, but I also want to reference the ripple effect that's associated with the 8 million meals that I referenced earlier. That food is sourced from American growers. So that we serve in our agencies, it impacts the agriculture community as well, because that's where we would be purchasing that food. So I want to make sure that, independent of a programmatic impact, I want to make sure that we understand the global impact that's associated with some of these cuts.
What's going on at the state level? I mean, there has been an effort, hasn't there, to support food banks in Tallahassee, right?
There is one, and we're all hanging out with bated breath, waiting to see if something comes through. But we're more than grateful that President Albritton of the Senate is sponsoring a Florida Feeding Farmers proposal that would provide a significant amount of support to the 9 food banks that are in the state. Now, it won't bridge the entire gap, but it would make a significant impact.
What about you, Candy? I mean, the Heart of Florida United Way provides a lot of services that people rely on, 211, for example.
Yes, so we actually operate 211 for a third of the state of Florida, not just here locally. We see, just in the last week, and we pulled these numbers just yesterday, we've had just about 2,500 calls that have come into 211. The vast majority of those, more than half of them, are dealing with housing and shelter. And so when those cuts happen to housing subsidies, then people are starting to look not only for how are they able to support where they're living, but what cuts can they make and what other organizations can they go to help cover the costs for other things so that they are able to pay for that housing. We're also seeing an increase in people who are asking about mental health, employment support, health care, and certainly food and utilities support. So across the board, these numbers are going up. And I think, especially when we look at ESFP as well, and we receive those funds too. Our funds have been held up, so they've been released, but they've been held. So we're just kind of hanging out, waiting. But as a result, because we help to manage those funds and distribute those funds to other nonprofit organizations like the Salvation Army and Christian Service Center, those organizations are now being held up as well. And so it is, we just sit here in a state of continuous uncertain times, which ultimately creates a state of chaos.
Yeah, all this talk of uncertainty kind of brings me on to this discussion about the budget in Tallahassee, or lack of discussion, I guess, at the moment. Those negotiations are kind of being slowed, right, by disagreements over tax relief. Skyler, you recently spent some time in Tallahassee talking about these sort of competing tax proposals, and I wonder whether you can talk about where things stand with the budget at the moment, given that so many things are at stake from what comes out of it.
Yeah, so right now, it's a real hot mess is how I would describe it. Yesterday the House Speaker compared Governor DeSantis to a 7th grader from Miami-Dade who tweets a lot. He said the governor was acting like that. And a lot of the disagreement is over taxes. So the House Speaker, he was really pushing for a cut to the sales tax. He wanted to reduce the rate from 6% to 5.25%. That's about $5 billion in lost revenue for the state. The governor, however, is really pushing for property tax relief. And what he would like to see done is he would like to see a $1,000 tax rebate for homesteaded properties. The House Speaker, however, does not like that idea. He said that he thinks that's kind of like a California-style program where you're just going to be essentially writing checks to homeowners. And the larger issue that's kind of being pushed by the governor is to eliminate property taxes entirely, which would require a ballot initiative in 2026, which would need 60% approval. But we don't really have a lot of specifics as to exactly how would that work. You're talking about $50 billion in property tax revenue that's going to local governments, to schools, to special districts. So, how are you going to make up that lost revenue? There is a House committee that is meeting to discuss that. There was a study done by a think tank that said if you got rid of property taxes, you'd have to essentially double the sales tax rate, which is a regressive tax, so that would likely hurt the low-income folks the most. So as it stands right now, everything's kind of up in the air with the budget, and they're kind of looking at this July 1 deadline to get something passed.
Yeah, the stakes are high, aren't they, for organizations that depend on state money, and I know that you guys do, Dr. Vazquez. What are you looking for when it comes to those negotiations between the House and the Senate?
So we are first and foremost wanting to preserve dollars that support the programming in our schools. And so there's been a lot of media coverage around slashing the funding that goes to advanced coursework in our schools. That's your AP, IB, dual enrollment classes. So we certainly would want to see that to be continued to be funded. We were pleased to see that we are given flexibility in the school start time. Although research supports a later start time, that comes with a price tag, not to mention that we already have a bus driver shortage of over 200 bus drivers. So that would have been quite a feat for us to be able to implement. Additionally, we continue to see the base student allocation, or BSA, reduced. So they are taking dollars away, saying that they are putting it into the BSA, and that does not translate.
So that's an amount of money you get per student?
Per student to fund them. And so we would want to see a significant increase in the student-based allocation from Tallahassee.
I mean, I wonder how many of the issues that the school district faces financially has to do with, say, that the state's open voucher enrollment. How much of it has got to do with sort of things that are beyond necessarily this budget? COVID, of course, had a big impact on the school district as well.
Yeah, it did. So for Orange County, we have been blessed for many years that we have seen an increase in enrollment. People were moving to Orange County, building, our economy was thriving. When COVID hit, we saw that decline, and we really have not recovered from that. And a huge part of that is what I call taxpayer-funded vouchers. And let me be clear, I am all for choice. I believe you are a child's first, you are the parent, you're their first teacher, and you should be able to decide how and where your child gets educated. But what I ask is that you fund it, and that you do not fund it on the backs of public education.
Well, what do you do? Because you're essentially competing against a larger number of schools. Does the school district now have to market more? Are you in competition with private schools, for example, homeschooling, things like that?
We are. And part of that is on us because we need to listen more. We need to understand what our families want to see in their public school. We have partnered with an organization that is helping us recruit families that have left Orange County Public Schools. Part of that is identifying why they left. If the families return and register and stay for 30 days, then we will pay a little bit under $1,000, which is coming from what we get for educating that child. So it's not like we're paying additional dollars. We are giving part of the student funding to the company. And then it's on us to be able to retain those families in our schools. So our board is looking at how we can expand choice, whether that is increasing the number of magnets that we have, whether it's looking at micro schools, whether it's looking at more public-private partnerships to be able to give our community, our families, the school settings that they are seeking.
I mean, in recent years, and one more to you. I mean, in recent years, when inflation has been high, the economy has not been particularly hot. Have you seen an increase in demand, say, for free and reduced lunches? And that's obviously an expense to you.
Yes, we have. This year, I believe our percentage is almost 80%. It teeters between 78 and 79.5%. We have been very fortunate that our team has worked with the Department of Agriculture for a grant that has not been impacted as of 12/15 today, where we are able to feed all of our children without cost. And for many of us, we don't realize how many of our children do not get breakfast at home, that the only meals they get are the ones they get in our schools. And you can't learn if you're hungry. So we are hoping that those grant dollars will continue.
Yeah, Derrick, you're involved in the food in schools. Tell us a little bit about the Second Harvest's backpack and food pantry programs.
Well, sorry, forgot about this. We've been involved in backpack programs that we've all heard about for a number of years now, but over the past couple of years, we've seen a need to allow that to evolve. What we found were scenarios where a child would take his or her backpack home, and what was in that backpack was enough for the child. But but we found that a hungry child also had a hungry family. And families were feeding off of that backpack as well. So as you can imagine, that one meal or 2 meals certainly didn't go very far. So we've gone into, we've expanded our program to a larger backpack program now. We don't call it a backpack, we call it school partnerships. And it includes food for the entire family. And I know, I know Kelly is well aware of this from her work at Evans, but we could not be more excited about this. We have 76 schools that are involved in this program today, 44 of them in Orange County. But what's a little frightening is that we have 58 schools that are waiting to join. So it is working. We've had some funders that have been very generous to us. Wawa, for example, has been very generous to us in trying to launch this program. But what we've been able to do is create a safe zone, in so many cases managed on campus by the students, that eliminates any type of stigma, and it's open to all students as well.
Are you confident you can continue to do what you're doing? I mean, you say if there's 58 schools that are still looking to be a part of this program, I mean, do you have the resources to make that happen?
Am I confident? That's a loaded word in today's environment. Since our resources are not public, since the funding is not public funding, it is in fact private corporate funding, I feel a lot more comfortable with those being able to continue those. And expansion isn't automatically money. In certain cases, expansion is having someone on site at the school to manage the program with the students. That's really one of the largest challenges that we're having. We could expand it if we had the resources on campus.
I mean, clearly education and food security are both something that are highly impacted by uncertainty. Kelly, I mean, you're an organization that's a sort of an umbrella organization, if you like, that works with other nonprofits. And I wonder which ones and what types are feeling the biggest potential impacts of the federal administration and DOGE cuts.
Sure. I think we really play 2 roles. We have a certain number of internal programs, direct service programs that we at Heart of Florida United Way administer, and then we do work with about 30 different nonprofits within Orange, Osceola, and Seminole counties. I think certainly there are organizations right now that are feeling more under the microscope. I think we probably all kind of know which ones those are because of the work that they're doing and the populations that they serve. Are the organizations that focus on LGBTQ plus populations have been cut. We have heard that from the tube in particular that we work with. Meals on Wheels over in Seminole County have expressed that they are having to, again, the money is there, but it's not coming in, and so they're now looking at having to cut back on the number of seniors that they are providing meals to. I think that then you look at our friends in all of our our child care organizations, you hear Head Start's going to be cut. Is it going to be cut? How much is it going to be cut? When is it going to be cut? It creates a state of uncertainty. Go back to that word uncertainty. But, I think so those individuals are starting to have to really look at what kinds of structures do they get in place, what types of public and private partnerships do they go after, and really looking inward at can we begin to cultivate private donations in order to support this, because I think, we talk about housing, we talk about food, but childcare is a critical issue. If you don't know where you can put your child, you can't go to work, right? And Allie back there. And I think, it's when one part of the safety net is weakened, the entire system feels the strain. And so that is why we must, as a community, work together to support these organizations that are providing unbelievably vital and important services for the citizens of this community. Because without those, things will start to really begin into a pure crisis mode.
I mean, I do wonder, given that we talk a lot about the affordability crisis in our region, whether it's affordable housing, the cost of things, the number of people moving here. I mean, does the fact that we have an affordable housing crisis, one of the worst in the country, exacerbate issues that organizations that like yourself are facing when it comes to funding as well?
Absolutely. I mean, I think Skyler was talking about, the cuts, looking at the tax changes and property taxes. Well, I mean, really, when you think about that, that's benefiting homeowners. But there is a huge percentage of individuals in our three-county area that are renters. So that doesn't help them at all. And if we're going to increase sales taxes, then it's an additional tax on those people, which then makes them have to make very hard decisions as to what are they going to put their money towards. And it is having worked for a long time with children. I started my career very proudly as an Orange County Public Schools teacher, and have been committed as an educator for a number of years. When you are living in a family that doesn't know where your meal is, if you're going to go home and have a house, have a roof, are you living in that car, which now is counting as a place to live, that's just not acceptable. Right, so families then, and as a byproduct, the children are having to really deal with those stressors about how do we afford to live? How do we afford those basic needs? Everybody believes everybody should have a cell phone and everybody should have access to streaming and kids want to be influencers and all of that. But if they don't have the basic needs in order to be able to function, then we are constantly in a cycle of putting families into that Alice category or falling further into poverty. And so if, Dr. Vazquez said, if a child is hungry, they can't learn. If a child has, an ear infection, they can't learn. If we're not educating our citizens, they are not able to have the tools needed to be able to get into those jobs that are careers, as opposed to just barely making by, just barely making your standard payments, your basic payments. And so housing and those things, I mean, it all ripples downward.
I mean, we're preparing a story this week on NewsNight, Friday night at 8:30, by the way, about homeless students. And we've been seeing point-in-time numbers coming out around the state. One thing that stands out is the number of shelter-insecure students. And I wonder, Dr. Vazquez, whether you think there are the support services that are needed for those families that are experiencing housing insecurity, and whether any of those could be in jeopardy in funding cuts.
So there are some, but there's not enough. As you stated, the number is growing, and those children need so much more support. At the school level, our board has put social workers as a priority to help with children that have what we call trauma, are coming from homes with trauma, and that includes not having a home. Certainly, what we're seeing at the state level and at the federal level has great potential to impact those services to our children, and what happens when those are gone. Do they drop out? Do you have children then that you see a number of, or an increase in the number of children that want to harm themselves, hurt themselves? Do they turn to violence and crime because they don't have the supports necessary within the school or within the community? And I think that's something that we have to grapple with, that if these supports are taken away, those dollars that are funding all of these partnerships, all of these support services, how is that going to impact our community? Because the children will find outlets. And thankfully, we currently have strong partnerships with many of our community organizations to provide those supports for them. But when they're gone, I think we will see an increase in crime. We will see an increase in suicide rates. and then we will have to deal with those issues.
I mean, Derrick, is our region, do you think, particularly vulnerable when it comes to funding cuts, given that affordability issue? I mean, you just recently came from Texas in the last few years. Did you see similar issues? And just sort of putting it in perspective, how do you think our region shapes up? Are we particularly vulnerable?
I don't think we're any more vulnerable than any other state. Or if I talk to my other peers across the country, they would say something similar. But one thing I do want to touch on as we talk about taxes and the like, and since we're in a nonpartisan environment, I want to talk about the impact of SNAP and the activity that's taking place with the reconciliation package that's underway in D.C. Make no mistake about it, any reduction in SNAP benefits equates to larger numbers of individuals and families seeking food from the charitable food system. That math is really simple. And that's something that we are really, really concerned about. Now, we're already struggling to meet the current demand. We were struggling to meet the current demand before the 8 million meals that we lost that I talked about earlier. And now we're having discussions about cutting SNAP benefits. And SNAP isn't the big boogeyman that everyone keeps trying to play it out to be. Actually, it's the most effective and efficient federal nutrition program that we actually have going. So, average, and just for the record, an average SNAP benefit is $6.12 a day per person. I'll bet you a whole bunch of us spent more than that at the coffee shop this morning. But that's what they get for a meal. So I just want to, and if Florida is required to pick up 10% themselves, that's 650 million where they're trying to cut. That's 650 million more that they would have to put into the system when they are trying to cut the budget. So most of the people receiving SNAP work because they can until they reach the cap. And I just want to put that out there. And also the fact that for every dollar that's spent from SNAP puts $1.54 into the economy. So it is not this boogeyman, and there's not all this fraud that we talk about. My team is up to 3,400 of these, of signing people up with a 94% acceptance rate. The state can only tout around 65 acceptance. So it works. It's needed in today's environment when everything from housing to toilet tissue costs more money. And it's something that we are advocating heavily for it not to just get cut so badly that it makes our lines almost unbearable.
Well, actually, you make an interesting point that you're also watching the budget negotiations that are going on in Washington. We talk a lot about what's happening in Tallahassee here, but I mean, Kelly, presumably nonprofit organizations and organizations like yourselves are also watching what's happening on Capitol Hill.
Yeah, I think, at the federal level, we are continuing to advocate for the expansion of the child tax credit. This is a proven bipartisan anti-poverty tool that really provides meaningful support to working families. It's one of those things that it's a powerful way for families to be able to cover the costs of the rising cost of childcare, of education, and basic needs. And I think, one of the things that we have seen directly, and we're working through right now, is we run the VITA, the Volunteer Income Tax Assistance Program. Provides free tax assistance preparation for families and individuals making under $73,000. This year, we had over, I think it was about 2,700 tax returns that were filed. With free preparation. That basically, when you think about it, it actually will, and the numbers aren't completely done yet, we're still totaling up, but it equates to about $2.5 million that goes back into the local economy. The grant that we receive for that from the government is about $69,000. I would say that that's a pretty good return on investment. And overall, within the state of Florida, it's about a $1.8 million investment. And 2 years ago, that total amount of money that went back into the economy was somewhere in the ballpark of about $76 million. So there's no real rhyme or reason as to why you would cut. There's not really a looking deep down as to what these programs are, what the return is, what the impact will be. And, you know, if a program like that, if we're losing funding for that, you know, then the question becomes, how do we continue to do this? Do we continue to try to figure out how to fund this? Or is that $2.5 million back into the economy just kind of dry up?
I mean, what happens at the federal level, Skyler, also has an impact on the state level. And I guess part of the budget negotiations in Tallahassee has to do with some of that COVID money that's drying up, right?
Yeah, so just to kind of piggyback off what's going on with the federal cuts, yeah, a big question I have is, so how is the state, let's say if we cut SNAP, if the federal government cuts SNAP, if they cut Medicaid, I'm not hearing a whole lot of discussion like how is the state government going to pick up that loss. So the discussion I'm hearing is we're going to cut taxes and hey, we might even get rid of all of the property taxes while we're at it. So yeah, I mean, that's a big question. And complicating the issue further is they have long-range economic forecasting that shows in 26-27 we'll be running like a $3 billion budget deficit.
State deficit.
Yeah, in 27-28 that could be up to $7 billion. And then complicating that even more, we're highly dependent on the sales tax. So let's say if we go into a recession, that's going to affect your sales tax revenue. And if they want to raise taxes, they need a 2/3 vote. So let's say you lower the sales tax, and then you realize, oh, we're in a lot of trouble right now. We need to do something. You're going to have to get a 2/3 vote to raise the tax back up to 6%, for instance. So yeah, it's a situation in Tallahassee in terms of how do you deal with that?
I see you nodding there, Dr. Vazquez. I mean, you don't get much money from the federal government, do you?
No, we do not. About 1% of our operating budget comes from the federal government, but the money we do get is critical, and I'll use Medicaid as an example. Individuals don't realize that a lot of the services we provide to our students with unique abilities, such as speech therapy, occupational therapy, physical therapy, we help pay for through Medicaid. And so in some instances, if you are to cut federal funding, say Title II. Title II funds a lot of professional development. You could say, all right, well, we won't have as much professional learning. Not ideal, but you would live with that cut. They cut Medicaid, we cannot say, well, we're just not going to provide those services to those students. They are required by law to receive those services. So now, those dollars have to come from the general fund, that one pot, which means we're going to have to take from another area to be able to pay for the services that would have been paid through Medicaid. And so I too do not hear a lot of conversation around Medicaid because I don't believe people understand the impact it's going to have on our one pot to be able to continue to educate our children, pay our teachers and our staff. That all will come from that one pot.
I think we could probably have a whole conversation about that subject alone. Time's pushing on, so I'm going to get to the dreaded part where I ask you guys to get your crystal balls out and look, which sort of seems unwise given that we've talked so much about uncertainty and no one really wants to predict the future. But I wonder I'm going to go to each one of you, what keeps you up at night when you're thinking about, say, 6 months into the future? Kelly, I'll start with you.
So I think, obviously, I wake up at about 2 in the morning with my dog barking or pushing me going, oh gosh, what are we going to hear about today? What is funding going to look like today? What is it going to look like tomorrow? I think about what are the programs that we're going to need to readjust? What are the programs that we're going to need to create in order to support individuals who now need additional services? But I also know that, there are moments where at least I personally can get wrapped up in everything that is just being said, and the things that are said today may be pulled back tomorrow, and then they may come back again the next day. So I think that there is something that we have to actually pay attention to what's happening and what the actions are as opposed to just the discussion. Will we have cuts? Yes. How much will they be? As my grandmother would say, only time will tell. But we have to be prepared for those. What I do know is that we are very fortunate to live here in Central Florida. It is a beautiful place to be born. When I really think about it, it wraps its arms around you. Nobody crowds you. Nobody's going to go it alone here either. And that's where we all come into play. No one is going to let anyone go alone here. And so while I will wake up thinking about things, I also know that we are in a very, very good place and that we will take care of each other.
Derrick, what keeps you up at night? You got a dog?
I do. And he knows better.
I think my dog needs to come sit with you for a while then.
I worry, or I am worried, about our ability to create a future for our children. Whether it's feeding them, educating them, ensuring that they have the proper health care. When we talk about things looking a little bleak, that's what keeps me awake, because they're the ones that are going to have to fix this mess that we've all created. So that's what I think about, and I think about ways to continue to feed them and make sure that they at least have nutritious meals, because we all know the science behind how productive a child can be with a full belly versus how unproductive they can be without one. And I just want to be that organization that continues to fill their bellies.
Nothing keeps Skyler up at night. He's a cool, calm, collected journalist at all times. But I do wonder, what your predictions are, particularly when it comes to things you cover on the state level, say 6 months out. Are we going to have a budget by then? We have to have that done by what, end of June, right?
I can tell you one thing that I'm keeping a close eye on. Our region is so dependent on tourism. Right now, the numbers look pretty strong. We have seen a drop-off in some international visitors, particularly Canadian visitors. They are avoiding the United States, but I'm keeping a close eye on that because, if we go into a recession, it's a vulnerable industry. People aren't going to be going on vacation. They're not going to be planning that big trip to Disney or Universal, and that could have huge ramifications for our community. So as I'm kind of doing my beat reporting in the coming months, I'm really keeping a close eye on those numbers.
Yeah, the macroeconomic situation is certainly another source of uncertainty. Dr. Vazquez, what are you predicting will be in the future in the next sort of 6 months or so?
So I echo the comments of my colleagues up here. How are we going to continue to educate our children, provide the services and supports that they need in these times of chaos? I am also worried. We have been incredibly fortunate in Orange County that our public supports our schools. First, you approved the extension of the half-penny tax in November, which allows us to continue to build and renovate our schools. In 2022, you approved the extension of the millage as well. And that has helped us continue to fund arts programs, guidance counselors, athletics. And if those dollars go away, then that would be devastating, because how would we then fill that void? But I am hopeful, because what I have seen in our community is that we do rally, we do support one another, we do care about one another despite our differences. And so what I am trying to keep in my heart is the hope that whatever the outcome is, both at the state and at the federal level, is that we will join together to support the children in our community.
All right, that's a good optimistic note to end it up on. I want to finish with a quick lightning round. With more than 800 members, what can the League of Women Voters of Orange County do to help as organizations like yours face this uncertainty? Start with you, Kelly.
So taking my 20 plus years in higher education, where I spent a lot of time teaching students about the importance of being an engaged citizen, it is times like these where this is now a call to action. We need all of you not to sit and talk about it, but we need for you to stand up. We need for you to get out there. We need for you to find causes and missions that mean something to you. You don't have to support everybody, but find a nonprofit. I challenge you to find one or two nonprofits that you believe in, that their mission speaks to you, and that serve the basic needs of our children and our families. Take some time to volunteer with those organizations. It isn't just all about money. We need your time, we need your talent, and that third T, we do need your treasure. But if you, I'm not gonna lie, but if you are at least out there doing that good work, if you serve as our advocates with your circle of influences, if you are able to talk about this work that is going on and you're out there doing it, that helps us. You are an extension of us. And so I challenge you to find that organization and to put everything that you've got into it.
Well, that's a pretty hard act to follow, since I was going to say something very similar. We can't do this by ourselves. No one organization has the resources or the capacity. It is going to take a collaborative effort of what we do, what our corporate partners do, what you do as an organization, and what we do or what you do individually. I would also challenge you to come and touch a mission. It's really easy, to say someone ought to do something about that, but it takes a special person to look in the mirror and say, I think that person might be me. So I challenge you to do that and be that person, because we all need the advocacy. We do several shifts at Second Harvest. We love having volunteerism. Volunteerism saves me around $5.4 million every year. I can buy a lot of food with $5.4 million. So find a cause. Find something. I'm saying the same thing, but and it doesn't have to be us, but please let it be somebody.
Dr. Vazquez, what do you think?
Ditto. So you're influencers, right? Just in the time I was here before we sat down, I must have talked to 10 different individuals that said, oh, I'm a proud parent of Orange County Public School. My grandchildren just graduated. So we need for you to be our advocates. We need for you to share on social media, talk to your friends about the great things that are happening in our public schools, our magnet programs, our advanced courses, the specialized services we provide to our children with unique abilities. Get to know what's happening in your local schools. Volunteer. Our children need caring adults in their lives. Somebody they could just talk to. Someone that they can rely on. Every one of our schools would welcome you with open arms to be able to touch the life of one of our children. And so I'm counting on you. I'm counting on Orange County for you to share all the great things that make us the #1 district.
All right. Well, how about a hand of applause for our panel here today? All right, at this time we're going to open the forum to League members to ask questions. Gina Hall is at the mic to the left. Just raise your hand if you need the mic to be brought to you. After that Q&A, do remain seated for some important League announcements as well. Gina.
Okay, if you have a question, if you want to come over here and line up, that would be easier. And again, this is a question line, not a comment line. And if you could keep it brief, because we only have about 10 minutes. Susan.
I was going to make a comment about my granddaughter at school, but I won't.
And it's my mic, so I hold on to it.
I'm the one that usually holds.
I know.
I used to perform. I usually hold the mic. Anyhow, here's my question. We always hear these ads. Buy a lottery ticket, it goes to education. The funds go to education. I just looked it up. In 2024, Florida earned $9.4 billion from the lottery. Only 25% went to an education fund. What is the education fund, and do you see any of that money?
So this is just a classic example of why you need to do the research, right? Because what happened with the lottery, they had great marketing. It's going to go for education. Who's not going to say, I'm going to buy a lottery ticket? Part of that's going to go to education. But what they did is they supplanted dollars. So if $100 million was going towards education, then they now took those dollars away and took $100 million that's generated from the lottery, and now that's where the $100 million is coming from. So it's not an ad. So that's what happened.
Thank you. Dan?
Your mic. I appreciate the call to action at the end of the discussion. I was looking for a website. So if you say we can volunteer in the schools, what's the website we go to volunteer in schools? If you say we can donate, what's feedhopenow.org? Give us an extra step for practicality.
You got that one right.
So that's my question.
It's a good question, yeah.
So ours is very simple. So Orange County Public Schools, OCPS.net. And there's tabs at the top, and you will find where you can volunteer.
Ours is pretty simple too, for Heart of Florida United Way, hfuw.org. And plenty of ways to volunteer with our organization as well, and to also contribute.
Well, I will repeat it, feedhopenow.org. And there's also a QR code in the middle of your table. Feel free. Yeah.
Hi, I was just, I worked for 30 years as a social worker for the state of Florida, and most of that time was spent working with children and adults with developmental disabilities. And you spoke briefly about Medicaid, but I think people need to understand that Medicaid pays for a lot more than medical services. They pay for supported living coaches, they pay for case managers, they pay for supported employment coaches, and so that money is really important, the Medicaid money, and those were the cuts that I was especially concerned about.
Do you have a question?
No, you're right. I just touched on a little bit, but there are so many services that are provided to this population that, number one, needs to be funded because IDEA requires it, but more importantly, they need that. That is how they become thriving, adults, and how they are successful in our schools. So you're absolutely correct. The Medicaid dollars pay for a lot of services, and that includes some personnel.
Thank you. Barbara. Thank you very much. Can you hear me? I don't really want to talk a lot about myself, but I happen to go to the same seminary that our current Pope was at the same time. And therefore, for several months, I want to challenge all of us, if you have any religious bent, to ask the question, why are we not prioritizing children and families who could not afford any amount of tuition to go to a private school? So I have written to all of the bishops in Florida, and I want to give you this last letter, Ms. Vazquez, Dr. Vazquez, asking the bishop to talk to you, because my question is, all of the parochial schools cannot serve the deaf, the blind, the physically impaired, the mentally handicapped, the homeless, all of that, none of that. This is really a moral and critical issue that I think all of us need to speak to our religious leaders, should we have that religious opportunity, to question, why are we not following gospel values and giving preferential treatment for the poor?
Okay, our last question.
Hello, everyone. I'm Felipe Sosa Lazabalé. I wasn't here before, but I am running for House District 42 and kick off June 3rd at the Abbey. What I wanted to ask is, when we look at the budget, what we are seeing is an increase on immigration enforcement. So these funds that we're talking about actually got diverted to do something that, in my opinion, is wrong instead of feeding kids. How can we better advocate through our budget process so these issues are at the forefront of our elected officials?
Anybody want to take that?
I believe, Felipe, it's great to see you. So I do think that sometimes we are overwhelmed with information and we tend to just reach a saturation point. But it is critical that you are aware of the issues that are impacting us. When our new president came into office, there was a lot of consternation and a lot of worry around immigration, especially in our schools, because our schools have always been safe places, right? Where children can, for about 6.5 hours a day, they can just be children, they can be educated, they can be loved and supported and thrive. But there was also misinformation that was put out around that. You know, they were coming to our schools, that we weren't following the law, and I think that creates more fear. And what that fear did is that now families weren't coming to school when they needed. So they're being deprived of the public education that they need. And so for me, it's about making sure you're aware that your facts are accurate and that you are advocating for those things that you are very passionate about. And so for us in Orange County Public Schools, we have tried to put out accurate information to our community, to our teachers, our employees, even our children, about what happens if an immigration officer comes into one of our schools. Our schools have been directed, they are to reach out to our legal department. Our legal department reviews the credentials and the documents, and then they give the school direction. To date, we've had one. And in that particular case, the child was no longer enrolled in our school. They were enrolled in a charter school. The agents had also gone to the charter school. We were able to share with the agents that the warrant that they had, provided that we notify the parents before any information was released. They agreed, they walked away. We notified the parents. And the parents then told us, yes, they were at the charter school. And so being informed is so critical, and making sure that you have the accurate information. Because when we create or add to the chaos and misinformation, that's where I think we work against one another.
Okay, we have one quick last question.
That's about Medicaid. I understood that the state of Florida refused the federal Medicaid money. Are they still refusing it? And therefore, the Medicaid money is just state money. And how might we, if that's still true, what might we address that?
Yeah, so Florida has not expanded Medicaid. There was no Medicaid expansion in Florida. There is actually an effort underway to get this onto the ballot in 2026 to expand Medicaid. However, that hit a bit of a roadblock because what the legislature has done has made it very, very difficult to get anything on the ballot. There was a new law that was passed that essentially makes it a crime to have more than 25 signed petitions if you're not registered as a signature gatherer with the state. There's tighter deadlines, there's greater fines and penalties. So this is a big change, and that really kind of will probably affect some of these efforts to try to put this before voters.
So when you say expand, you're not saying more state money. The state has refused to take federal money.
Yeah, I mean, it was federal money. At one point, I believe it was, I'm going off the top of my head, but I think it was 100% federal money to expand Medicaid, and I believe it went down to like 90%. So yes, it's majority federal money, and Florida just elected not to take. I mean, this kind of goes back to the whole anti-Obamacare sentiments that were out there.
Yeah. Another really, like I said, we could do an entire hour about the Medicaid issue, probably immigration as well. But that is all the time we have. My thanks to our panel. Let's give them a big round of applause as they return to their seats. All right, we're going to close. Stay seated for a moment for some announcements from Co-President Reverend Kathy Schmidt. Thank you all so much. Appreciate it.
All right, a big thank you to our moderator, Steve Mort, and to all of our panelists who have given us a great but alarming glimpse at what smaller government will mean for us in Central Florida. It shows us the true cost of dismantling our social safety nets. I did want to say on the petition question, I was on a call within the last week. There are two petitions that the League has been involved with, the right to clean water. They are suspending collection of their petitions for right now. But if you have been involved in the petitions for Medicaid expansion, those are still being collected, at least for now. Check with your point people if you are working on that. I hope that everyone learned some new things, that everyone is inspired and will commit to monitoring in the weeks and months ahead. Before we close, a few calls to action and reminders of upcoming events. First, calls to action. Please complete our survey for the event. We value your feedback. Look for your ways, as our panelists have said. Please support the organizations that are making society better and are increasingly under existential threat. Free, quality public education is a bedrock of our society and is rapidly being privatized. Stand up for it. Support nonprofit organizations like Second Harvest Food Bank and Heart of Florida United Way, many of which are facing funding cuts. Journalism is essential to democracy. Subscribe and support to trusted media like Orlando Sentinel, WUCF, and Central Florida Public Media, among others. I believe all of our panelists will be around to chat with you afterwards. You may also wish to speak to Nicole Abendondolo, who is with us today. She is the Central Florida Public Media Development Director. Can you give us a wave? As you may have heard, Central Florida Public Media is facing a loss of $300,000 in federal funding, the equivalent of 3 to 4 reporters, the cost of producing the local discussion show Engage, and 40% of national and international programming. The legislature will be back for unfinished business. Sign up for text alerts. Find the links in our newsletter. Indifference is not an option. There is work to be done, and as a league, we need to move forward and step up in every way that we can. So please join us. Upcoming events, we are reinvigorating our Women's Rights Committee. Meeting will be held on Zoom next Tuesday at 7 o'clock. You'll need to register for that through the usual methods. If you don't know what those are, please let me know, and I will help you know. The DEIA Social Justice Book Club. Did you like all those words in one sentence? May 21st at 7 p.m. on Zoom. And our State League Convention will be held here in Orlando on June 6th and 7th. We do have a few more spots for delegates. If you would like to represent our league, please reach out to me or my co-president, Jane Hirsch. There is no Hot Topics overtime today, but that gives you more time to check out the tables in the hallway, including perhaps buying some league merch. We have new polo shirts, white and purple, so that we can just be out there, people knowing what we do all the time. Our next Hot Topics in June, Pride Under Attack. Defending LGBTQ+ rights. I'm sure that will be a hot one. And with that, we are adjourned.